Good morning. Nice of you guys to drop by.
What a piece of junk. What are you talking about?
Don't be too proud of this technological terror you've constructed.
Look, don't worry. Everything's gonna be fine. Trust me.
I don't know what all this trouble is about, but I'm sure it must be your fault. Don't get technical with me.
This bickering is pointless.
Don't everybody thank me at once.
I don't know where you get your delusions, laser brain.
I'm glad you're here to tell us these things.
How could you even say that?
I got a bad feeling about this.
Well, come on.
Everything's perfectly all right now. We're fine. We're all fine here now. Thank you. How are you?
Would you get going, you pirate?
Get in there, you big furry-o! I don't care what you smell!
I'm getting too old for this sort of thing.
If what you've told me is true, you will have gained my trust.
I like the sound of that.
Get a shuttle ready.
I don't know. Fly casual.
Shuttle Tydirium, what is your cargo and destination?
Transmission commencing.
Hey everybody, thanks again for tuning in to another exciting edition of the Shuttle Tydirium podcast, where I am your host, Jim Chadwick, also known as Hey Chadwick on the forums. I'm your pilot, but I do have sitting next to me my co-pilot, trusty co-pilot, Phil Mead. How you doing, Phil?
I'm good. I'm sure everyone will want to know about the latest travel advisory from Endor. The gas giant of Endor has entered its third phase in relation to the forest moon of Endor. And that means one thing: Ewok mating season. So do be advised when traveling among the Ewok villages on the forest moon of Endor that Ewoks may be more aggressive than usual, and more physically aggressive and more aggressive in other ways.
Ooh, yikes. We don't want that. Be careful while you're out there, folks.
Yeah,
Go
take care.
Go in groups. Stay in pairs. All right. Now, speaking of human relations, we do have our HR bot, our cranky protocol droid. J-Bot, how you doing?
Oh, not too bad. Hopefully the loud noises and bangs of the area around me won't disturb you guys too much. That's just me trying to keep the Ewoks out of all the vital systems and that sort of thing. They like to hide while they're doing this whole ritual stuff that they're, I don't know. But yeah, that requires a lot of oversight on my part. So if you hear any bangs or explosions, just ignore it. That's business as usual here in Human Resources.
All right. And I hope that doesn't interfere with the machinery. We have our chief engineer, Biff. Spaceman Biff, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. It's a little stressful. As J-Bot's kind of alluding to, these little buggers are getting in just about everything. I've been in some areas of the ship that I didn't even know existed. But luckily, Jake left me some shin guards that have proven to be very, very valuable when these little buggers get aggressive. So,
oh, you might have to wash them afterwards.
For the most part, we're doing good.
All right, excellent. Well, let's go ahead and jump straight into our captain's question. I have to admit, I'm still not used to this twice a week thing. It kind of throws me off. But we do have Empire Day coming up, and that's kind of interfering with our recording schedule. But hey, everybody loves Empire Day, so we'll roll with it. The captain's question is, with all the ships out now, if you were in this, not part of the shuttle crew in the Star Wars universe, I hear an Ewok getting kind of aggressive next to me. If you
I've got some Ewok pepper spray if you need it.
Oh, I think I do. Jalapeno spray or something. Sanitizer or sanitary wipes. But
well, you know how these things go.
Yes, get off my leg. oh my goodness.
Yeah. Oh well, a lot of gunfire going on. Hold on, let me mute the mic.
Yeah. If you guys were having to not be part of the shuttle crew and fly on your own a particular ship, what would it be? What would be your ship to fly? And I'm going to go straight to Biff because he's an engineer and it probably has this already charted out.
Oh Oh man. So no, I don't have it charted out. I think I'm going to give you kind of two answers. There's going to be like my what I'll call my standby, what I always kind of fell back to, like even when I was doing the old TIE Fighter and X-Wing games for the PC in my younger days. I always loved the A-Wing because I liked the speed and to some extent the maneuverability it was kind of offering. I really liked being able to do the hit and run type strategies to where I come in guns blazing, then dump all the power to the engine and just blow out, extend, and figure out how I wanted to come back in and re-engage the battle. So I always liked the A-Wing.
It makes me think. I had a friend who used to drive a pickup truck, a big pickup truck, and he switched to like I don't think it was a mini coupe, but it was something of that particular size. And he said he felt safer in that little mini coupe because he could actually see things and he could react. He felt, even though the other thing was like a giant tank, but it was just so cumbersome. He'd like to have the little agility and the he felt safer in his little vehicle with all these giant SUVs of the late 90s being around.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. Yep. I think the other ship that I would kind of throw out there just from a complete curiosity is the Star Viper, and for me it was when that ship was introduced, I wasn't familiar with it at all, didn't know its backstory or anything, so it just kind of struck me as in like, wow, how would that ship, just the shape of it, the structure of it. I don't even know that the wings folded until you guys started talking about, you're breaking your models. And so you repaired it.
I re-glued mine, and I think it's pretty solid. I think it's doing much better.
So I think that would just be a neat experience to fly the Star Viper with how it's configured and so forth. So,
all right,
those
Phil,
are my votes.
We'll go to Phil next before J-Bot breaks it all with some unconventional.
What are you talking about?
What are you talking about? I don't know.
Well, I think
Phil,
I'd like to fly the Hawk.
Why would anybody want to fly that thing?
You're just trying to.
I'm looking at the Wikipedia page, and it says it's an extremely maneuverable ship, and you can have
it's
your
also
friends.
the same size as the Falcon.
It's pretty big. Very powerful blaster turret. Seems to be built into the standard model. It seems pretty cool ship. There's room for your spices and your
beer fridge.
Yeah, beer fridge. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So what about you, J-Bot?
Well, no, I wasn't actually going to go with the Hawk.
Damn it.
It's a nice try. It's funny because I'm gonna go back to another game too. They actually added in the old Republic Online game a dogfighting kind of mini game PvP, and which lets you choose from kind of a heavy, like a really heavy craft with like one big ordnance style gun, and then kind of a medium, and then like an A-wing style, very agile. And I always drifted towards kind of the heavy ordnance carrier. So I'm I guess more of a Republic fan than I am Empire, at least when it comes to X-Wing. And so I would go K-Wing. I love the idea of loading that thing down with just tons and tons of missiles and bombs and things. And you just can't really do it in the game that well without really kind of putting all your eggs in one basket. But I like the idea of being able to do it. I'm not a huge fan of TIE fighters in general. Like I'm just, as a ship, the whole TIE design has never really struck me as very interesting. So
that's why you're on a Lambda, because it's not a TIE.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And the K-Wing feels more like kind of a heavy bomber that you might see in kind of modern warfare, like just large wings carrying lots of stuff versus kind of just a bunch of torpedo tubes kind of stuck and glued together with some solar panels on the side, which is
TIE designs have become really parochial too. That's
Yeah, so I mean, it's crazy in the world of Star Wars how funky some of the ship designs are, but the K-Wing just feels like it would actually work. It feels like a ship that could work in atmosphere and in space versus some of these that look like they would only work in space. So,
or only atmosphere.
Or the other, yeah. But you figure, hey, you figure, hey, if it can fly in air, it should be able to fly in nothing pretty well too, right?
Yeah. All right. So I'll go with mine, and I'll say that initially at first I'm kind of torn because there's what I would really like to fly, tactically, strategically. There's what I would go for comfort. So my cheap answer would be the Jumpmaster, because this is a ship that's designed for like one or two crew to go out and find new jump points. In the middle, you've got to go for long periods of time on a particular ship. So it's got a lot of comforts from home. You've got your jacuzzi hot tub. You've got your, full kitchen. You've got like an entertainment system. You've got some really loungeable space going on in a Jumpmaster that, like, the Lambda Shuttle is better than the Sentinel. We're not a troop transport. We're here to transport, officers and various other important, passengers. And while that is good, they care more about the passengers than they do actually the captain, which doesn't quite agree with me. So my cheap answer would be the Jumpmaster, just because the straight up, it's pretty maneuverable and all that, but it's got the comforts of home. But if I was in a combat situation, I would probably go with the Tigressor. I really like the idea of it being able to load out with ordnance and with a turret and still be pretty maneuverable, and the whole concept of them working in pairs and kind of skirting the edge of the battlefield and shooting in and cover each other's tail. To me, if I had like a decent team of Tigressors, I would feel, pretty invulnerable. So Tigressor is where I'd feel actually in combat where I'd want to be.
Cool.
All right. So, moving on from that, do you want to touch upon a particular set of posts from one of our Facebook listeners, or Facebook friends, fans, whatever? Fred Coleman, and Fred is from Antwerp, Belgium, and he's part of Ego Squadron, which is the diehard enemies of id Squadron. So he goes on talking about X-Wing and a negative play experience, and he kind of he's talked about this before, and talking about playing people, like what happens if he's at the game store, he's looking for a game, and then there's that guy who's got that totally meta list, but you're just like, whatever, I'll play. You can beat me, you'll be over fast, and I'll kind of get the next game on. And he talks about negative play experience a bunch, and being on the edge of quitting, and trying to make it still a fun game and worthwhile. And he's playing, what he considers fun lists, not competitive. And he says negative play experience is the enemy, not Jumpmasters. So Fred Coleman from Eagle Squad in Belgium. Shout out to Eagle Squad. I'll say that, to me, and I responded, I think that if you're really looking for a casual game and you really don't want to do the tournament, and you show up at game night, and it's not a designated like right before tournament, and because if there's like a big store championship in a couple weeks, you've got to expect everyone to be practicing for it. That's just natural. But if you're going for a normal night and you're looking for a game, and there's somebody who pulls up with like the biggest meta hardcore list, like, oh yeah, I got this. You want to play a game? And you look around, and there's like nobody else. It's just you and him. You're the only ones. It's okay to say no. Like, you've got to be able to create the idea of a non-tournament meta game. And if you just kind of play stuff, people are going to just play the meta stuff all the time. If you do nothing different, people are going to bring the meta, and you're not going to have fun games. And I think it's okay to say no to a game. And I don't mean to be rude about it.
Yeah, be polite.
But it's been like, no, I really want to play tournament level. I just, it's not gonna be fun, and because it's probably not gonna be fun for them or for you. It's gonna be a waste of time. And people have talked on this thread. People talk about playing the game and just, well, I just hope it ends quickly so we can find different games. But to me, it actually says more when you when you actually say no, they're going to notice. Other people around you are going to notice. And it's going to bring up the idea and the concept of like, no, that's not how I want to play. And it actually draws attention to the fact that there's a difference. And it doesn't have to draw attention to the fact. Attention, but not tension, not, filthy casual versus tournament. It can just be like, no, I just don't want to. I'm looking for a different game. Don't you have a different list? Don't you have something else? Or I'm looking for, one of those fun games. And to me, when I've done things like that, that's when I've actually found people who are like, hey, I'm going to finish up soon. I'm almost getting creamed here. I would love to play you. Hearing people like that talk. And when you actually take a stand like that, one, it draws attention of a lot of people to the store. They're like, what? You're not going to play him? Why? In that whole concept. And it brings attention to the idea of a not tournament game, just kind of a different standard of playing. And also people will notice so that other people who are like you will pay attention and notice. And I want to play a game like that. That sounds like fun. I want to play you next time. I don't want to play somebody else. And it actually creating that division without being unpolite about it can help start creating that conversation. Does that make sense to people?
It makes sense to me. I mean, the way I always looked at it is if you're taking a list and bringing like a fun casual list, and you're not trying to practice for a tournament, and you go to the game night and someone wants to play against you and they have a hardcore tournament list, they're practicing for the tournament, I don't even see that game being fun or useful for them either, to say nothing of you. And it's also the case that there really are, Fred talks about negative play experience, NPE. There are lists that exist out there that, especially in a situation of a casual list going up against a tournament list, is just not. Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry. It's me in your throat. Anyway, people are gonna think we're just old fogies if you keep harping on Typhanims. Anyway, there definitely are those lists out there, and they exist out there now. I think Minox Squadron is touched on this a little bit in their, I think their latest podcast, which might be a little.
Yeah, they did
a couple weeks when this actually releases. Where they talk about, the effect of negative play experiences, and, especially in this case, there's no reason, right? If you are going up against a list, and you are not trying to practice for a tournament, you are not bringing a top-tier list, there's really no reason for you to be playing against, in a situation where you're not going to have fun. You're not going to learn anything useful about your list. The other guy's not going to learn anything useful about his list, other than that it can be, a lower tier list.
Yeah, total jank.
Right, it's not useful for either of you.
So Biff, you're a pretty polite, nice guy.
So I what I liked about Coleman and that whole thread in like its simplistic form is the notion of sportsmanship, in that it doesn't do anybody, kind of in simple terms, any good if you bring people to a game that are intending to compete at an entirely different level. Not that many people want to go to like an NBA basketball game where you've got, the professional squad going up against the high school team. It's not really that terribly, going to be competitive. It's probably not it's going to be one-sided. So the whole notion of, with the sportsmanship, communicating what the intent is, to be able to make sure that the people that are coming to the match are bringing stuff of comparable competitiveness. And if we're doing that, I think that's what's going to make it be a win-win for everybody.
It doesn't have to be the exact same level, and it just has to be, reasonable.
Yeah, it has to go to the intent. The intent is, exactly. Hey, I want to have a competitive match, so I'm bringing something I think is competitive. You're bringing something that's competitive. If I'm not coming into it with a competitive view, I may very well be walking into that negative play experience. And I think somewhere in the thread, somebody had mentioned, hey, this might be the one night I get to go out of the entire week or maybe 2-week period. I've got 2 hours to have some fun. And if that's what my experience is going to be, I may not come back.
Yeah. And I think if you want to, if you don't mind playing tournament or whatever, that's fine. But like, I did an early episode about creating a casual scene, and I really think that the pregame discussion is pretty important about that. And whether it's hey, I'm going to the game night this night, and I'm looking for something different, or you're actually at the game night and you're saying, I'm looking for something different to your opponent across the table. And I think, like, a lot of people have some sort of crazy janky list they want to try. And having the conversation is an important step before you even play the game about setting expectations. And I just think that there's things you can do, and I talk about creating the casual scene. There are things that it's important. It's important to do if you're wanting to build playing the game like you like, to talk to people or make your point known without being offensive and insulting, to kind of get that going.
Yeah.
J-Bot, any words?
Oh, I could go on for a while on it. Well, I'll try not to take the whole thing. I saw the thread on the Facebook page, and I think I did respond. I can't remember exactly what I said, but it was something along the lines of, there are certain lists that I will refuse to play. And I've told the people as much, and they're aware of that, and they don't bother even bringing it to the table to play against me. But they also know that. They're like, oh, he's not going to play against that list. And they've told other people, which is funny. But I do think the communication's a key. We have, in a way, we have kind of a similar type of communication for our local group, where if you post, we have a Facebook page for the local area. If you're looking for a specific thing, you can post on there. Say, hey, I'll be at the local gaming store, whichever one it is. Parker Banner is ours. I'm going to be there. I'm looking for X, right? I'm looking to play. Hey, we have some people starting to play Armada, for example, and they'll tell people, I'm looking to play Armada. Anyone interested? And that kind of primes people ahead of time, which I think helps a little bit. But I also don't think that the burden falls on the casual player for this sort of thing. I think that the tournament person, the person who's practicing for a tournament, needs to, basically, the burden needs to fall on him. I know this is going to sound like me pushing this off on someone else, but if you're a true tournament person and you're practicing for a tournament, do you really want to play against one of my lists? Is that going to serve you any purpose? Like, I might not care as a casual guy. I'm like, hey, this will be fun, because if I take a win off of you somehow, then I've had a great night and I've just ruined your night, right? And you've gotten nothing out of it. Versus, hey, if I'm a tournament guy, don't I want to practice against someone I know who is taking the game really, really seriously, who I know is going to try and compete at a really, really high level and isn't just there to goof off and have fun. And I know, for example, we had I think it was last year before one of the regionals or something, one of the locals came to me and he said, hey, do you want to play a game? I'm like, I'm not looking to play a tournament list. I did the communication like we talk about. And he actually specifically said, no, I want to play against XYZ list. And he told me a specific list he wanted to play against. And since I'm casual, I'm perfectly okay with, hey, yeah, sure, I'll throw that list together and play it against you, knowing that that's the type of game he was looking for. He was a tournament guy. He wanted to practice against the tournament level list, and he gave me the build specific. I'm perfectly okay with that because I'm pretty freewheeling. I'll do whatever they want to. I had just as much fun doing that as if I had played a casual game against someone else. But if I had set my casual list on the table and tried to play against his tournament list, I would have had a horrible time. And just because he prepared ahead of time, because he's like, I need to practice against, no offense, a real list and not one of my goofy ones, then he actually, to me, that burden fell on him. And I think that sometimes the tournament people lose sight of the whole fun factor, that it should be fun for both of us. And that doesn't necessarily mean you can't get good competition, but you need to ask for it. Come in there and say, hey, anybody looking to help me practice my list, or help me with this, or let me fly against a specific build so I can practice against it. Because, I mean, not to toot my own horn, but he didn't run that list that I played against him. Like, because he played against me running a tournament list I really never run. And when I beat him, he said, oh, God, that's not good. Because, not that I'm bad, but if his list couldn't beat a tournament list played by someone who's not a tournament player, he knew immediately that he needed to kind of step up his game or find some changes to his list. And that comes sometimes from playing a casual player who's not used to playing a list. Sometimes you get that sort of thing. But I think that burden falls on the tournament person too. If you're practicing for a tournament, don't just go into a store looking for a game so you can face roll people and make yourself feel good, because it doesn't teach you anything. And as a casual player, it's in a way it's easier for us. I definitely don't like going every week and getting smashed, but eventually that casual player is going to get sick of it and you're going to lose that person. So I think it falls on both people.
I will say that we're spoiled with so many game stores. And
we are.
With the idea that we really pushed casual, so that I would say that our experience is there's a significant people I've talked to or I've listened to that they don't have many options. And
yeah, that's just something that's a little bit different, I guess, for us. We have half a dozen, maybe 8 or 9 stores, it feels like, in our area within, say, an hour and a half, which is a ginormous amount of stores. And so there are tons of players. There's tons of different nights to play on.
X-Wing every night of the week at a different game store.
Right, yeah, and sometimes 2 nights, or 2 different game stores on the same night. So
yeah,
there's obviously a lot of X-Wing in this area. But I guess back to my point is, tournament players, if they're listening to this podcast, don't shirk that casual guy and turn him off. Don't just face roll him. Talk to him, because you might learn something valuable from playing an unorthodox player, playing someone who doesn't know the optimum strategy for every situation. The best akin I can make it to is poker players hate playing against people who don't know how to play poker, because they make stupid, kind of inefficient moves, and they do things that are abnormal. But like anything, the more times you play with people, the more you're used to seeing these abnormalities, the more normal they become. So just because somebody's casual, when you hear it at our store, oh, those are the casual guys. And Blake and some of the other guys are, no, play them, because you never know what you're going to run into. You never know what kind of crazy list Jim's going to put together, or some weird combo that I've dredged out of these cards that makes no sense and doesn't work because I can't fly it, but might actually work in the hands of somebody better than me. Like, you just never know what you're going to run into. And so as a casual player, don't be afraid to play those people, but just let them know ahead of time, hey, I'm running a crazy list. You might not get anything out of this as a tournament guy. And all I'm doing is here to have fun. So if he starts getting kind of the better of you, I might just say, okay, that's fine. I'll call it here and go play another game. Just don't be afraid to tell people and talk to each other before the game starts.
And just to go through with my latest binge of bringing up Blake on every podcast, that's Blake from Sling Paint Games and the Hornet Squadron Radio podcast. So hey Blake, I know I've been mentioning you on every other podcast I've been on, so it's going to keep the trend. All right, so we can probably move through and go into the ready room. Should we go to the ready room for these 2 missions, dealing with the Gen Con event?
Yeah, let's do it. So this is a sneak peek ready room for the round 3 missions in Gen Con for Assault on Grayskull Base.
Stand by alert. Stand by alert. Time environment. 15 minutes. Yahoo! Got it! I got it! Great kid! Don't get cocky! Chewie, get us out of
So, the two missions.
I want to say first off that I think that what I found playing the round 3 missions, 3A and 3B, a reconnaissance and ammo. Was it ammo dump? Ammo depot?
Munitions depot. Or
Munitions depot. I know it's close. Playing these two particular missions, I know I found that it can be a very do or die situation.
Yeah, the stakes are pretty high in these missions. So, at least what I've been finding so far, especially with Recon Run, is that the player who wins usually wins pretty big, with a pretty big margin, like of more than 100 points or so. And the other guy walks away with scraps, like
a whole lot of nothing.
20 or yeah. It's not to say that one side tends to win more than the other in reconnaissance. I haven't really seen that so far in the testing, but whoever wins tends to take home almost all the points on the table.
I mean, I have played the exact same list on reconnaissance against 2 different players, and in one game been utterly crushed within a few rounds, and the next game absolutely crushed with the same list. So I don't even feel like it's you've picked poorly, therefore you're going to do bad. But I feel like I think sometimes it can come down to the dice and how it goes for 2 rounds.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with your tactics too. So let's describe the mission.
Yeah.
So generally, what's happening in this mission is
we're talking about 3A reconnaissance, right?
3A reconnaissance. So what's happening is that the Imperials are sending out reconnaissance patrols to try and locate the rebel base. And what that means for this mission is that you're going to be fighting in a sort of a fairly standard asteroid field, like 6 asteroids on the table. And but there's also going to be 6 tracking tokens scattered across the table, which represent reconnaissance scan points. And one of the Imperial ships is the reconnaissance ship. It has a reconnaissance package on it. And that ship is going to need to fly over or fly near these various scan points to get points, to get points for the scenario. As it performs its reconnaissance, you get your score increases. For the rebels, you want to destroy that reconnaissance ship or chase it off, and make sure that the reconnaissance run isn't completed. So you need to, you destroy that ship.
Now, can I say that with this and the setup range, so that Imperials set up at range 1 of their table edge, and Rebels start at range 1 to 3 of their table edge, that I found asteroid placement to be pretty important for the Imperial players, and placing things, normally your opponent's on range 1 and you're in range 1, and putting things at like range 2 and 3, the board edge is important, but when they're starting at range 3 from their edge, that changes how you want to put your asteroids, and it's hard to recall that, to think about that, but it's I found to be quite important.
Yeah, certainly too. If you want to interfere with the enemy's attack lanes on you, you can set up as the Imperials to prevent sort of an early coordinated attack from the rebels. Right. So, like you said, the Imperials deploy within range 1 of their table edge. They also deploy first before the rebels. So all the Imperial ships go on the table first.
Now, Biff, how many points do the Imperial players have?
The Imperial players get 130 points in their squad list.
Okay, at range 1. And so how many points do the Rebel players get?
The Rebel players are going to start off with 120 points And as you mentioned, they get to set up within range 1 to 3 of their table edge. So there is a 10-point advantage to the Imperials in this mission.
Right.
That also goes through with the rebels, the Imperials having to have their reconnaissance ship, which will be a bit of a target. So
right. So
Yeah.
the Imperials have a built-in liability in their list because every recon scan point on the table, and there's 6 of them, is worth 30 points. If the scan point is still on the table at the end of the game, the rebels score those points. If the Imperials pick up the scan point, then they get those 30 points. And there's a little built-in safeguards against shenanigans. Like, for example, you can't run your rebel ships off the table and pick up all the scan points. If there's Imperial ships left on the table at the end of the game, and they can actually end up picking up recon scan points. And if they have the recon ship still. So, I've thought about that, at least. That little exploit. Anyway, so the dynamic at play here is that the Imperial player needs to protect their reconnaissance ship long enough for it to pick up these recon scan points, or at the very least pick up a few of them. Because if that recon ship gets taken out within the first pass or so, then the rebels can essentially just fly off the table, pick up 180 points worth of scan points, and have a very convincing victory, even if they lose a couple ships in that pass.
Yeah.
So you might be tempted as the Imperials to not include your reconnaissance ship in that first pass, but then you forfeit your points advantage over the rebels because any reconnaissance ship is going to cost more than your 10-point advantage. So you won't be able to, you shouldn't be able to just straight up beat a rebel squad in a straight up dogfight with the non-reconnaissance ships. If you want to actually clean up the rebels, then you're going to need that reconnaissance ship probably.
Now, Biff, there are some rules about doing an actual scan with a passive sweep and an active sweep. Do you want to tell me about the passive sweep?
Certainly. So the passive sweep is where the ship with the reconnaissance package, so the primary Imperial ship, if he happens to overlap one of those recon scan points with their ship base, it's an automatic accomplishment of that scan point. So the Imperial player that has overlapped the recon scan point gets to take that token off the play area and is going to put it in a small pile on their side of the board. So they've earned themselves those 30 points.
Right. And then the other way to pick up a recon scan point token is with an active sweep. And this one is an action, and the action is just to remove one recon scan point token at range 1 and place it in your pile, and then you get a stress token. Actually, you assign stress tokens to yourself until you have at least one stress token.
Right.
So if you have like stress dampening effects in your list, like Captain Yor or something, then you're gonna load up those stress dampeners too. So I don't recommend trying that.
Right, or if you did push a limit to, focus and then do an active sweep, you get no extra stress. So I
did very much like.
Go for it.
I did very much like this being the active sweep being an action. In the games that the playtests that I did, I was able to really hose up the Imperial recon ship by bumping, and that usually prevented them from actually overlapping their intended scan point, but then it also eliminated their ability to perform an action because they were probably within range 1. So it was a really, really effective way of neutralizing some of the ability of that recon ship by just simply bumping.
Yeah.
Was a nice. So I very much like that aspect of these passive and active sweep.
So J-Bot, I got a question for you. If you were the Imperial player, would you go for a large base ship or a small base? And even this could be like the villainy of Scum and Villainy, or an Imperial ship. Would you try to go for a large base or small? Like, what would be your tactics?
I guess it depends on what the rest of my list looked like, and not being a super Imperial, I wouldn't really know all the crazy large base ships that I had to choose from. But I like the idea of using a large base ship just for the opportunity to try and land on the tokens versus trying to actively scan them. It just gives you a little bit more kind of margin for error when it comes to that. Although they tend to be giant kind of sitting ducks for things, I think you can get around that a little bit if you choose, I guess, ships that help kind of escort it instead of just going for pure firepower. Just to throw out an idea, I know what Jim ran against me, but the idea of running maybe like an Imperial fire spray, because it has 2 agility to start with and might have the ability with some help.
It is a big ship, yeah.
Yeah, to get some help with it. But I'd have to to really sit down. I really got rocked on this mission the 2 times we tried to run it, so I'd have to rethink things.
That I played this with different people, and it's about 50-50 for me as the Imperials with large base ships, winning versus losing. And I actually wanted to try again with a small base ship, like trying to do something like Leighton, the Seek fighter, that every time he gets missed, he gets a free evade token, and then doing something like somebody with a squad leader or some other way to get some sort of bonus actions onto him, or a tiny mind leak, something to kind of give him a boost so that he can actually try to stay alive. And I went primarily with a large base ship, but I'm really curious to see how it would work with a small base that was geared towards survival for the Imperials, because Imperials do have a lot of high agility, pretty mobile ships that you could actually go through with that. And I haven't actually tried that method, and I think it'd be pretty interesting to go try that.
Yeah, that's definitely a good option for the Imperials. This mission is one of the reasons that the TIE Phantom is banned, because the TIE Phantom would be just perfect.
Right? Yeah, that was where I was like, man, I totally would use a Phantom if I had the opportunity to use a Phantom. Yeah. What do you think to the idea of using just a scum ship that can take that cloaking device, which name sent Tim is
cloaking device.
the illicit cloak? Yeah. What about that as just an idea?
Yeah, I mean that's not a bad idea, especially if you're. I mean the drawback to the illicit cloaking device is that you forfeit your own shot, because there's no advanced cloaking device for the scum, right? So if you're going to be cloaked during the combat phase, you're going to be cloaked for the whole combat phase. It also craps out every once in a while. Theoretically, yeah, it would be pretty good, because you would act as a damage sink. That actually brings up a interesting decision point for the Rebel player, or the Rebel team player. So the Imperial players have the choice of whether or not to run their reconnaissance ship with the main pack of ships, right? Either they can send their escorts at the Rebels, try to whittle them down to the point where they're not going to be able to take down the recon ship before it completes its run, or maybe hopefully kill the Rebels as they try to get at the recon ship. or as the Imperial player, you can run all your ships together, leverage your point advantage, include the recon ship in your attack force, and just try to destroy the rebels outright. So those are your two basic strategies as I see them. As the rebel player, you essentially need to make a choice based on what the Imperials do. Either you can, if they send the escorts at you, either you can tangle with the escorts, try to burn them down, and then go after the recon ship, or you can try to avoid the escorts and go straight for the recon ship. That can be very tricky, I'll say. I haven't met with much success in that tactic. I would only recommend doing that if you have something very, very mobile. Or if the Imperials split their force, if the Imperials combine their force, then another decision that you have to make during your attack run is whether or not you're actually going to focus fire on the reconnaissance ship in that opening pass, because a lot of times the Imperial player in this mission likes to build their reconnaissance ship very defensive. And if you were in just like a normal 100-point match, death match, the last thing that you would do is attack a very, very defensive ship in the opening pass. You're attacking the enemy team's tank, right? It's a stupid move unless unless there's some good reason to do it, unless it's going to regenerate later or something like that. But the Imperials don't have any regen to speak of, and the scum probably any scum Imperial players probably won't have anything serious either. So you have to really consider what you're going to shoot at first in that opening pass, and that your victory or your defeat can hinge on that.
Yeah, I agree. That we did this, I think, twice. Jim and I did, and I was running similar lists, I guess, both times against his identical list. And I think the dice were what let me down the first time, because I basically had all shots that I could on his screen. He had done something weird with his, I think he was running a shuttle, and had like bumped himself or gotten himself in a weird position where he couldn't really maneuver into the front group. So the front group had kind of broken itself away a little bit. And I can't remember what all I had. It's been a few weeks now, but I know I had a lot of heavy hitting ships like B-Wings and things like that. And it just kind of broke apart against their little wave of guys in front. I'm like, I don't think like one interceptor and a couple of ties should have been able to take out a bunch of B-Wings and like an E-Wing and some stuff like that. But it was like in a straight up gunfight. I had like twice as many dice and just kind of fell apart against it. But
yeah, the dice did.
Yeah, and
when I tried it again the second time, or against somebody else with the same list, I just got utterly crushed. Like my green dice was terrible, my red dice was terrible, or at least mediocre, and I got utterly stomped by.
Yeah, the thing about the setup on this is it's really hard for the rebel player to stop the Imperials from getting at least a couple of the scan points.
Yeah.
Since they can be set up basically right inside their zone or close enough that they can pick them up pretty easily. But after that, it's like as a rebel, you almost have to either set up at range 3 and just charge in as hard as you can, or just accept that those first couple are going to be lost and kind of plan your attack based on which direction he's heading. Because he has to pretty much commit his force one way or the other, and it doesn't matter really when the dice let you down, but that's otherwise. I mean, I think the mission's okay. I mean, having played it, I think it's fun, but it does, for me, it does feel a little bit like a one pass sort of thing. If in that first pass, everything just kind of crumbles against each other, if both sides get really good, like clean shots up early, it might just be that it becomes one or two ships that just survive it, and that's all that's left is you trying to chase down the scan ship or lose the scan ship in that first pass, and then it's over realistically over in a handful of turns. So at least in the games Jim and I played, they ended it pretty quick, like 3 or 4 turns. Effectively ended that fast.
Yeah. It's pretty brutal. Like when I did it, both ways was brutal. You know.
Yeah, it really it forces you into it because the rebels can't dawdle at all. They have to commit.
Right. Yeah. There's no like wasting time. No, I'm going to turn sideways. You see this a lot of times in 106 games where I'm going to put my guys sideways along my edge so that I could kind of, decide when I want to turn in against your, once you've committed. This, you can't do that. It's just, point straight at where you're headed and hope that you win on that first kind of initial thrust. And at least there wasn't a lot of chicanery. There was no real trickery involved with our matches, but maybe we didn't see an overall strategy there.
It was a brutal fight. It was a brutal, and I really feel like it can come down to your dice. Within 2 turns, it could be decided.
I would agree with that assessment. The 2 play tests that I did with my son, we used the same list. It was a rebel list, and then I would call it a villainy list. We're using the scum and villainy faction for the Imperials, and so we used the same list, but we switched sides between the 2 play attempts. And it was although the Imperials won both matchups, that first matchup it was a little bit closer than the second matchup. The second matchup was pretty much a rout, but I agree with the assessment that the mission is kind of unforgiving. You have that merge, and depending upon how the merge goes, and that plays to the tactic chosen and how successful that tactic was, will now set the stage and pretty much, my gut feeling is pretty much determine how the rest of it's going to go. The dice can always change things. Maybe if you've got an ability or a card that all of a sudden rears its face and kind of turns the tide, but it's that merge. I kind of visualize, the old classic, like what do I want to call it, like the battles and stuff that maybe like the Scots and the English
like
they're fighting.
Syndrome.
Yeah, Braveheart kind of scenario where you've just got these guys with swords and clubs and stuff, and they're just running at each other and they just smash into each other. And it's like after the dust settles, it's like count up how many people are on each side, and that's who's going to be the winner, kind of a thing.
It certainly feels that. It certainly feels that way. We used to have there's an old game way back in the day, some people might know, called Car Wars, and it was what you'd imagine, cars with guns on them fighting each other. And we used to have they had this idea of if you're ever running at each other, if you're in this big arena, if you're ever running straight at each other in a way, and you make this collision, as you might, it's a head-on collision, the crowd sees this giant explosion. I remember my buddy who was running the game, he's like, the crowd sees this huge explosion and they see like my car come out the other side of it. And of course, woohoo, I'm the victor. He's the best driver. It's like, no, I think his car just somehow didn't take as much damage as the other one. It was really, both cars were eviscerated, but mine still had enough wheels to continue going forward. And that's what it feels like in this, is you hammer each other, and some people just make it out the other side with 1 whole point left. And you're like, yes, we made it. Turn around and take out that ship that's lollygagging behind the rest of them. But unfortunately, I didn't have that luck when I ran it. But it does feel a lot like that, Biff. It feels a lot like you hit that merge point, as you called it, and then just hope for the best. And I'm sure there's better tactics. I know that, but that's what it felt like to me. I'm sure there's better tactics out there.
So even though I think that the mission can be unforgiving, and you might look back on your tactics on, did that work or did it not work? The one thing that I left the recon was a desire to do it again, because even though I may have been slaughtered, I can look back at some of the aspects of, how did my tactic play out? Was it the best? Maybe I should have tried a little bit different. Or, wow, my dice were really lousy in that spot, but had they been like normal, it would have been like a different scenario. So I was, even though the score might be imbalanced because it's kind of an unforgiving scenario, I'm compelled to do it again because I just feel like I have a chance if I did a little bit better in my tactic, or I rolled slightly different dice, it would have been maybe a different story out of all of it. So
yeah. So I think overall we can say that Reconnaissance can be a fair but brutal matchup, and if you happen to get this, expect it to be ugly.
And I do like the idea in like the third round for there to be the potential for a pretty big point swing. So if maybe you're a player that's not doing so great from a point standpoint, you come into the third round and there is the possibility that you could pick up a lot of points in the third round.
Yeah,
and vice versa. You could be up there high in points and come out of the third round and you took a step back. So I do like that idea.
Yeah, and there's something to be said when we're testing these. We're testing them with no more than one unique character or upgrade, or I think it was just character or whatever it was. But in the third round, assuming that stuff hasn't died and that you actually got unique characters to begin with, you might actually still have a lot more forces to play with than we did. We were running mostly generics. I think Jim had one really high level guy that I was just itching to kill just for giggles more than anything else. He had like a pilot skill 8 guy that he threw in there, and I'm like, I'm going to kill that guy. But he was a TIE fighter pilot, so I don't remember who he was, but I'm like, I'm going to kill that guy just because it would make him cringe in the next round. Not that really mattered, but I think that would be the little bit of a difference from the narrative event versus how we're testing them, is that you'll have people show up with different kind of sets of skills, different opportunities than we have, just building these things from scratch. So I'm interested to see how people will run with this, because I don't want it to feel too much like the first 2 rounds didn't count. This is where all the points matter. But it can swing that much. At least it felt like if I had won the first 2 by close margins, Jim would have crushed me in this one, and I would have lost everything I gained.
Instead of vice versa?
Well, yeah, that ain't gonna happen. me winning a game? What?
So you say. You beat me. You've beaten me numerous times. So, all right. Do we want to go into the next mission? And I know that there is some changing going on. So if everybody who's looking at these particular mission packs and not paying attention to the draft, this is not final answer. I do think that there is going to be some change to this. Phil, do you want to talk about that?
Right. So we've been doing testing for munitions dump, and I think I decided that we wanted to change the mission a bit here. So
due to rigorous playtesting, that we are actually testing these missions.
This shows that we're actually
AKA me complaining.
Yeah.
So we're not just like throwing some crap out and second-rate missions.
Right. So here's the
trying.
basic idea. Here's the basic idea of munitions dump. There's an Imperial arms depot out in space, and there's a few patrols protecting it, but the rebels think that it's a ripe target, and they want to hit it, so that the Imperials have to assign more forces to protect it, fewer forces out there looking for the rebel base, in addition to blowing up some Imperial supplies in the meantime. So the rebels have a small strike force. They're trying to blow up these containers full of Imperial weapons. The Imperials are trying to stop them from doing that. We have 8 containers on the table. We're going to have a force of rebels, which will be slightly fewer points than the Imperials. Right now I'm working with 120 rebels, 130 Imperials, which I think was the previous points total.
That's correct.
It may change by the time it makes it to the final draft, but right now what I'm doing is splitting up the Imperial force. So half the Imperial force will deploy at the beginning of the match, and then the remainder of the Imperial force deploys at the end of the third round right now. That might change. That kind of detail might change, but pretty much what happens is the rebels start with a points advantage on the table, but the Imperials get reinforcements, and they come in from any table edge, so they have a positional advantage in addition to the overall points advantage that they would have in general. So the rebels and the containers yield right now equal points to the rebels and the Imperials. If the rebels blow them up, they get points. If the Imperials keep them alive, they get points. About 25 points per container. So there's a few choices that both sides need to make. The rebels need to decide whether they're going to try and corner and eliminate or whittle down the Imperial force that starts on the table, and try to have just a total squad wipe and container wipe, which could yield them a whole bunch of points. Because if they kill 130 points worth of Imperials and then pick up, it would be 200 points in containers. That really, really is quite a few points. But it's also very, very difficult for them to pull off that kind of victory, because the Imperials don't have to engage them quite so immediately off the bat. If the rebels look like they're going to make that kind of play, then the Imperials can react and probably trounce them, because when the Imperial reinforcements come, they go down wherever they want. So it'd be tough as a rebel to do the damage that you need to early on and survive and fight effectively against the Imperial reinforcements. So that's a very, very risky move, but it could pay off big time too. It's sort of a safer move to go.
Can I say that I tried doing it, and my dice to blow up the munitions dumps were pretty abysmal. I think I got like one of three in an early first round strike that I could have. I was expecting to kill at least two of the three, if not all three of them, and that really hurt me. And just the whole game, I think by the time I finished it, I had every munitions dump had at least like half the tokens gone, but I just couldn't finish them. It was pretty annoying.
Yeah. So each in the current version, all the containers for the munitions dump have 5 hit points and zero agility dice. So they're relatively easy to blow up. They have a bit of hull, but they're not going to be throwing any dice back at you, and they're obviously not modifying any dice. So shouldn't be, and they're sitting ducks, of course, because they're not going anywhere. So fairly easy to destroy them. The Imperials do have the option of assigning evade tokens to them through a protect action. I don't really see too many players doing that, but it is an option. Mainly the Imperials tend to try and whittle down the rebel forces as they're attacking.
It worked a couple times for me, a couple times, but not too often.
Right. So the Imperial player has a few tactical options here. Either they can try to engage early, which does make sense if the rebel team player has divided their forces very much, or if they're out of position to actually repel your attack. Because if you leave them alone for 3 turns, then rebels are going to pick up quite a few containers, and then they might just be able to escape after that. So that doesn't exactly sound like a winning play as the Imperial player. You can't really just sit back and hope that the rebels don't do too much damage over 3 turns. On the other hand, if you try to commit early and the rebels manage to bring all their forces to bear, then you're probably only at best going to be bringing like 90 points worth of forces against 120 points worth of forces. So, you know, that could go very badly for you if you don't play your cards right. So both sides really have a delicate balance. Their strategies are pretty delicately balanced in this mission, I would say.
You know, I played against Mr. Eelbeater in our local group, and he had he had 4 TIE fighters. I can't remember if they were Academy or Obsidian or something, and they just kind of flew on their own, like a little squad of 4 TIE fighters. And I didn't think much of those guys, you know, at first, but they started ripping me apart. Like 4 TIE fighters, I forget, like how brutal they can be. Just like weren't black squad, crack shot. They didn't have Hal Runner, but they were just 4, you know, TIE fighters. They hurt.
Yeah, especially, you know, it depends on what they're shooting at. You know, like if it's a high agility target, they won't be super efficient shooting at it. But
I think it was X-Wings that I had.
Yeah, X-Wings, they will definitely start tearing into those pretty quick. Once you start using up your defensive focus token, you know, there's not a whole lot of defensive, you know, ability in an X-Wing. 2 dice is pretty moderate. So, yeah, it's you have to be careful in this one, I think.
2 questions for you, Phil.
Mm-hmm.
I'm liking what you're throwing out there as far as potential changes to the scenario. With respect to the potential for the Imperial player to be splitting his forces, were you thinking about if you do this division, would you do that off of the number of ships they bring into the table, or would you base it off of like points?
Right now I have it as ship count.
Okay.
So
okay.
The Imperials should be able to, you know, leverage that to their advantage a little bit, assuming that they have ships of differing point value.
Yep.
But
okay.
it does depend for them.
And then the other question, the scoring. Did you indicate that the containers are going to score the same for either side?
Yeah, that's what I have it right now. That might change.
Okay.
The Imperial players might end up getting a little less. That's what I originally had it as. I originally had the Imperial players scoring 10 points for surviving cargo containers, because it does, you know, it is pretty restrictive on the Rebels. They need to, you know, keep pumping fire into those cargo containers to pick up points, right? Whereas the Imperial players don't really have to do anything. They just need to go after the Rebel players, and they get points anyway for that. So they're really, you know, by destroying Rebel ships, you kind of do double duty for points as an Imperial player. Because you're preventing future cargo containers from being destroyed, and you're destroying Rebels. Destroying Rebels gets you points as well. That said, the Rebels usually get, you know, like around 2 to 3 rounds of, you know, or usually like 1 or 2 rounds of free punches on the cargo containers. So they're picking up points.
Yeah, I found it more 1.
Yeah, I mean it really. The splitting up the Imperial forces makes it much more risky as the Imperial player to try and bum rush the Rebel player. So if they bum rush a Rebel player and lose half of their attacking force in the first pass, which is very, very possible going up against such a you know, superior force, then they could be at risk for a total loss. Which would be a complete disaster for them and huge victory for the Rebel. Like a 300-point victory. Could be a huge disaster. So, you'd have to be careful about that kind of thing in the new version. You can't just rush it mindlessly.
Yeah, that definitely adds a very interesting nuance to the strategy of divide. And I also like the idea of the container tokens not having any agility dice. I ran my scenario through to where the containers had 2 agility and defense, and that was pretty.
Yeah, I think that was making it too hard for the rebels to kill containers. Also, the rule about exploding containers doing damage. That added nice thematic flavor to the scenario because it's supposed to be munitions depot. So you're shooting at containers full of missiles and bombs. I did find that it hurt the rebel player quite a bit because they had to be super careful about getting close to those containers, and that is a very normal consequence of attacking something that's stationary, is that you get very close to it.
Yeah, I lost 2 ships to blowing themselves up while blowing up the things.
Yeah, in the end,
it's okay. It's cheaper to blow it up than it is to to let it live. Let me see, a 20-point ship and a 25-point box. Blow it up, take it down, sort of thing was what I was doing there at the end against Jim.
In the end, I didn't think it was really adding what I wanted it to add, so I took that rule out. Also, people I think would forget that sometimes. So.
Making the containers a little bit, I'll say, easier to destroy, like the elimination of the agility. I think it also opens up more of a possibility that the Imperial player would use that protect action. At least it's coming more into their thought process of should I do it or should I not do it, as opposed to if the container by itself is already rolling 2 green dice every time an attack occurs, you're just less likely to want to use the protect action. So I like it. It may still be rare that the Imperial player would use the protect action, but I think it just makes that decision possibility more likely. They're going to think about it, and I like that.
Right. Yeah, I want that to be useful. It's just usually, it's often just a better idea just to, focus or target lock or something. But, those containers are worth a 50-point swing. So it's not, it's something you should definitely consider if you can possibly keep one of those things alive.
Yeah, and I think it's also important what ships you take. Like I ended up taking some A-wings, thinking the maneuverability and the agility would help keep them alive. And they were the last ships on the table, but they had a hard time actually putting out the damage to actually kill things. So,
Right.
What you take as the rebels is important.
Definitely.
So one last thought on my part, given what you're talking about as far as kicking things around, we're going to start the game off with potentially the Imperial player not having all of their forces out on the board. And that will, to some extent, give the Rebel player maybe a bit of an advantage until the remainder of the Imperial forces show up on the board. And I realize you haven't necessarily settled on how long that might be, or even if you're doing all this stuff, but you're throwing out maybe around the third round, the remainder of the Imperial forces come out on the board. What's, I suppose, my concern with the strategy and just thinking and kind of reacting to this stuff in real time, what's going to keep the Rebel player on the board if he's had, maybe two rounds of fairly uninterrupted, opportunity to take out munitions and maybe tangle with Imperial player. Now all of a sudden the Imperial is going to drop ships and be at a really good advantage because they're going to be able to pick out where they come in. What's going to kind of keep the Rebel player engaged, because he's now going to be outmatched in points by 10, assuming no ships have been destroyed up to this point. So what's going to kind of keep them from just, hey, I killed 2 containers and I'm going to cut my losses. I mean, I suppose there's 6 other containers out on the board.
Yeah.
Or is it 8? So there's still a lot of points on the board, but you think that that's going to be the compelling region to keep them going?
Yeah. So I would say that that's one of the main hangups I have right now with my current version is that you tend to have a 4-round game where the rebels skip town immediately after the Imperial reinforcements come on the board, and that's something that I need. That is definitely something that I think will change. That's why I'm not really settled yet. That's why something will change.
Well, I know if we look at this kind of a best case scenario in three rounds, I think Jim and I, when we set this up, we set the tokens up at least what I thought the absolute perfect line. So 3 of them across the Rebel deployment zone, 3 of them across the Imperial deployment zone, and then 2 in the middle, thereabouts, wherever they would fit. So in 3 rounds as the Rebels, you're not going to get to that back 3, not realistically, and still actually have any kind of attacks on the front 3. So at best, if you split your forces up as the Rebels, you're going to get 3 of those. You might get a 4th one while you're running when the reinforcements come in, depending on where they come in at. So the best case scenario is for you to split the points, really, is for you to not lose any ships, the Imperials not to lose any ships, and for you to come out of it with 4 containers and hopefully get a 5th one on your way out. And that would be your only kind of consolation, is that maybe I can get 5 containers and that'll be the difference, right? Because at that point, that would be that 5th container is the only difference in points.
Yeah,
it
all
that's
depends.
Where
a lot of it depends on your hitting power. A lot of it depends on what the Imperial escorts do. Like, I've run, I think, 4 or 5 tests with this so far, and the point splits have been, first game was Imperials 125 to Rebels 75. The second game was Imperials 87, Rebels 113. Third game was Imperials 160, Rebels 30. And the last one I did was Imperials 86, Rebels 114. And a lot of those depended on how they depended a lot on engagement strategy, whether the Imperials made an early attack, whether the Rebels the squad composition made a big difference. Like one of the reasons that the Rebels didn't actually win the first match was because they were able to kill quite a few containers. I think they killed 6 containers in that mission. They had, I think, 5 B-Wings. And they were able to bag 6 containers, which I think is kind of reasonable for 5 B-Wings.
Yeah, that's a lot of firepower.
Yeah.
But their problem was that they lost 2 B-Wings on their way off the table. So then it's like 24 points for each of those B-Wings, a 48-point swing for each of those. Let's see. Well, actually, they lost. Yeah. So, they paid a lot of points for losing those. So, if they had been more mobile, maybe if those had been X-Wings, I don't know, they might have done better in that mission. But the B-Wings had a lot of hitting power, and they have, they're fairly beefy, but they just didn't move fast enough to get off the table in that 4th turn, where, it made sense for them to run.
Yeah, I wonder if all things are equal, the Imperial player ends up with more points, right? So if 4 containers are killed, nobody dies, the Imperial player ends up with more points. Is that right? The 10 extra points? Or do they not get
No,
anything?
it'd be even.
That's right, because you don't get points for surviving. It's only points for destroyed.
The
or
rebels
lost points for losing.
the Imperials get the same amount of points as the rebels do for cargo containers. So if the cargo container survives, gives 25 points to Imperial. If it is destroyed, it's 25 points for the rebels. In the current version, anyway. So it's
yeah. I can see the sticking point there of trying to keep the rebels from just taking what they can and running. Because if they get 4 containers, then there's nothing to keep them in the match whatsoever. Especially if they can run past another one and have a chance of getting a 5th one as they run off the board.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what I really want to avoid is that game where there's no engagement, right? Because that ends up just being a boring game. If all the rebel player does is set up their ships, blow up 5 containers to get the point advantage, and fly off the board before the Imperials engage, then that's kind of a boring game. I think that in most cases, in order to set up to get 5 containers, you have to split up a little bit. And if you split up your force, then it creates a opportunity for the Imperial player, who I think deploys second. Yeah, the Imperial player deploys second. So they'll be able to see whether you split up or not. So they'll have the opportunity to try and bushwhack one of your flanks, where they have the local points advantage. So that's the dynamic.
And that's what I was thinking is that, I mean, yeah, it might only be 4 turns, but it might be 4 brutal turns. But not having played this version of it, I don't really know, because I don't know how. And you're saying you're thinking about splitting it up by the number of ships on the Imperial side, not by points in any way?
That's what I'm going for right now, but I might switch to points just because it'll give a more reliable distribution between those 2 waves. You know, because you might, if you have, just Academy pilots for the second wave, you might be able to load up pretty heavy on the first wave.
Right.
I was thinking, I ended up playing with the Y-Wing, with Ordnance Y-Wing, and I was totally set up to do an Alpha Strike with the Imperials as the rebel player, and I was all set. And I came in, and I didn't blow up the middle ammo dump, and my Y-Wing was like millimeters landed on the edge of the ammo dump, and I didn't get an action that I couldn't shoot, and the whole Alpha Strike situation didn't happen, and everything utterly fell apart from that point on, and I utterly got crushed in that whole mission.
Yeah, I think that the earlier version really had the rebels hanging on thread. It was possible to win as them, but I think it was pretty tough. Especially because they had to face the entire Imperial force coming down on them pretty quickly. One of their saving graces in that earlier version was that the Imperials really didn't get very many points for cargo containers. So if you killed a cargo container as the rebel, you got 25 points, I think, and if you kept it alive as the Imperial, you only got 10 points. So if you picked up a few cargo containers, it could really, mean something to you. But it was hard to do that in the face of so many Imperials. Because the Imperial player or Rebel player, it doesn't matter. You get a pretty decent point swing for every ship you destroy. Like,
Absolutely, yeah.
If you're destroying a B-wing, just a blue squadron B-wing with nothing on it, that costs 22 points. So that means it's a 44 point swing. Because the Imperials go up 22 points, the Rebels go down 22 points. So, destroying those, it's harder to destroy a B-wing than a container, but, it's a pretty good investment, especially since destroying that B-wing keeps more containers alive.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that the Imperial player has in their advantage is that the Rebel player has to focus its attention, at least in some large way, against those containers and not against their ships. So, yes, they might have a numerical advantage, but if they don't really take any time attacking the containers, unless they're just going for that, I'm going to try and take everything out idea. If they don't do that, then they're going to get basically nothing. They could get run off the table and get 0, or end up like me. I killed 5 containers but lost every ship in the effort. So
right, and you don't really get points for that.
Then I got 5 points.
Yeah.
So
I think that the ace play as the rebel player is to set up and make it look like you're going to be going after containers, but actually be planning for the Imperial player to be attacking one of your flanks, and dial in maneuvers to, reconcentrate your forces on that first turn, and surprise the Imperials as they come in to try and beat up on a few of your ships by, attacking them with your whole fleet. That could really set you up, but I think that would be pretty hard to pull off in real life.
Yeah, you're begging for some good dice in that instance.
Yeah, because if you screw it up, if they don't commit, or if you don't get the engagement that you want, then you're in really bad shape, because you haven't fired at containers very much, probably. If you haven't taken a pretty good amount of Imperial ships off the board, the rest of them are, coming right up your tailpipes at the end of turn 3. Could be very ugly. So, yeah, but
I like it. I think it'd be interesting to try.
Yeah. I think my main concern is making sure that we don't have a quiet 4-round game with rebels destroying 4 containers and fleeing.
Are you forcing the Imperial player to bring everything of that second wave in on the same side, or could they theoretically split it up across multiple sides?
Right now they can split up.
I know it's not the greatest idea, but I didn't know if that would give them that.
Sometimes it'd be nice to to play on both sides of a corner, for example.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of what I was thinking. Is that having no clue how this stuff would shake out, where you might want to bring in. If you have like a really heavy hitting ship and other stuff, hey, I've got 2 really good heavy hitting ships that I might be able to cover, or at least dissuade the rebel player from running off the shortest end by putting it in front of them, and knowing that it's gonna get a lot of fire, but it might also be able to scare them away from that side with the kind of the return fire and everything else. But I'd have to see it in practice before I really would know.
So we'll see what I come up with to work on that one. I think it'll be just slightly different in the final version. We'll see what happens.
I'm re-energized to do this munitions dump with the changes you're putting out, the potential changes you're putting out. I wasn't too terribly thrilled with trying to continue to test what had been there. So this is definitely good stuff. I'm anxious to see how this will play out on the table.
Good.
Yeah, I think it'll be good. I think it'll be a lot of fun to try. So hopefully I can get J-Bob back at the table to try it out again with new formats. We won't be hating it too much.
Oh, come on. I always hate it. I hate all of it.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you pick whichever side you want. Your choice.
It never works. It's always a trick.
All right. Also, as a side note, Andrew Beach out there, I just approved you for the Facebook page. So just a little shout out for you for joining the Facebook page. Did it while we're recording.
Traditional live Facebook update for the podcast.
Yep. Stupid, I know, but there it is, real time.
Cool. Jim, was there something else that you wanted to do before the end of the show?
Yes, I do want to say thank you very much to our Patreon support. So we do have a few people out there that have actually donated to the Patreon page. We'll make sure to go ahead and link it in. No pressure. You don't have to join, particularly because right now we have no prizes at all. But there were people that were asking, and we do appreciate it. Particularly, that I think my microphone, if you ever hear any weird audio from me tonight, might be on the edge. So I might need a new one. So thank you very much for the Patreon page.
Yeah, I think it's. I also think there's plans in the works here in the near future to kind of post up some of our Gen Con narrative / Mario Kart kind of prize stuff. I know some of it's made its way to Facebook in small amounts, but I'd really like to get kind of a big complete picture for everybody to kind of see all the crazy stuff we've been working on, and all the, I guess, sponsors have helped us out with, which I think is really cool. Just the people willing to throw in stuff for the casual side. So those nasty tournament players don't get all the cool swag. But yeah, we're also trying to finally get you guys to approve the fancy stress markers and target locks too. Once we get that I can post some pictures up of that once those start getting finished.
Definitely, I should do some better pictures of Black Box 7. I've always loved their templates. I really love their templates. Everyone thinks of their Greenman design with their cool pictures and unique templates, and they've been the best. I've loved their templates. We got some of their template sets to give away, and some of their tokens, some of their asteroid templates. I'm pretty excited about all the different things. And I think everybody in the winning side is going to get something from Black Box 7, which is pretty darn cool. I'm very thrilled about the support from Black Box 7. So thank you very much, guys, all the way from Germany.
Yep. There's some really cool stuff. There's some really cool stuff. A friend of Biff's is making something custom for me that I can't wait to see. See in progress pictures that I can't wait to see the end of that. So I don't want to give that away because I think it'll be a huge surprise. But I think that if it goes the way I'm thinking, I'm smiling ear to ear just thinking about it. Honestly.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think about I'm trying to see if I can find a teddy bear locally that I can get pretty affordable, and then turn into a dead Ewok I can drag around. So that might not be a prize, might be something I actually carry around. All right, but I think with that we're coming up on Endor. Anybody have anything they want to talk about?
I think we're good. Yeah,
none
6
here,
weeks.
sir.
Right at 6 weeks from Gen Con, so it's sneaking up on us really fast.
Jeez, 6 weeks.
Woo!
Dun, 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 dun.
All right, so hopefully next week I've got some here's the theory cluster stuff I want to talk about as well. So hopefully we can get into that. But I will say thanks again for listening to the Shuttle Tydirium podcast, and hopefully soon we'll see you guys at Gen Con for the 40 people that'll be there. Everyone else, we will put stuff out for the global campaign for everybody. And thanks again for listening to the Shuttle Tydirium podcast, where we make mistakes so you don't have to.
See ya.
Thanks, guys.
If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to help us continue improving and expanding our channel's content.